National Safety Coordinator for the Airline Pilots Association, and thank you so much for joining us here this morning. One note about the weather inside, as you probably noticed, it's just about identical to the weather outside the building, and so we are having management work on the air conditioning system. I kind of sense it's cooling down a little bit, so we won't have to bring the beach ball and sand and ship it in here. But seeing as this is going to be a lot of discussion about working group items, you're certainly welcome to take off your tie. I certainly won't tell on you. So on behalf of the President, our President, Captain Lee Moak, and ALPA's 52,000 pilots, welcome to this latest in the series of one-day events designed to provide a forum for discussion of critical topics to aviation. I'm pleased to be serving as your MC today, and I'll be giving you an overview of what to expect in just a moment. Today's focus, as I hope you'll know, will be on proactive use of safety data, and we hope that you will leave with a better understanding of how data can be collected and used to improve the already enviable and astonishingly good safety record that we enjoy, especially in commercial aviation. The establishment of effective proactive safety data programs has been a key issue on ALPA's agenda for many years now, and it has been a focus of discussion at almost every level of our organization. ALPA's goal, shared I'm sure by everybody here today, is to work with our industry and government partners to make these programs part of the fundamental fabric of our airlines, now and in the future. We want to see them well-developed, well-maintained, and well-used to identify risks in our operations before there is any adverse impact on those operations. I had the opportunity to brief safety committee from a board of directors, one of our carriers last week, and they had a really interesting term. They called it Premortem. And I thought, what a absolutely perfect way of looking at effective use of data, identifying the precursors to the precursors before you have to go back forensically after the fact and look at why something bad happened. Before I go any further, I want to thank you all for your commitment to safety. You wouldn't be here on your own time, helping join others in the discussion and your key busy schedules without clear commitment to this issue. If you didn't believe there's value in continuing to improve on our understanding of how we can all use safety data that is available to us, you would not be here right now. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to our colleagues who are attending the annual FAA EASA Safety Conference starting tomorrow and who are able to join us today. In particular, I'd like to thank our friends in the FAA for their longstanding commitment to the sharing and proactive use of safety data. It has not been easy for them, as regulators, to face the many challenges of defining and overseeing these programs, but they have worked with stakeholders throughout the aviation industry to make it work. They have led the efforts to take lessons learned in one segment of the industry, the airlines, and use that experience to improve safety culture and safety records throughout aviation. Developing an event like this, just like developing good safety programs, requires teamwork and partners. So I'd like to extend a special thanks to our sponsors, A4A, Boeing, Airbus, MITRE, and RAA for their support. It's that kind of support that makes it possible for us to provide a means for what I'm sure is going to be a very productive discussion. Please join us in acknowledging the support of our sponsors this morning. Thank you. Big data, and especially aviation safety data, is all around us. It literally envelops our lives. In the last several decades, our industry has seen a dramatic evolution from flight data recorders that captured just a few basic parameters etched essentially on a roll of tin, to the latest generation of aircraft that are literally capable of capturing thousands of data points every second throughout the course of every flight. We have so much data available, in fact, now that as humans, we cannot begin to understand it without help. We need massive data processing capability to make sense of it in the first place, to capture it, store it, and organize it so that it can be effectively used to identify trends, to identify hazards, and most importantly, to help us identify mitigations. Without a way to do that, all that data is just so much white noise. We need to figure out how to aggregate it and how to use it very, very wisely. The volume of data represents tremendous power, and like any powerful force, we need to make sure it's used appropriately. Everyone in this room probably understands or perhaps has seen firsthand how organizations or states have been challenged to collect and use this data to establish good, solid programs. It's not an easy task, and our discussion here today will help us all understand some of the lessons learned, challenges, and considerations in proactively using safety data to, again, improve what is already a remarkably safe industry. We're fortunate enough today to be joined by a very long and distinguished list of experts and senior leaders in the field of aviation safety. In a few minutes, we'll hear from FAA Administrator Michael Huerta on a number of initiatives in the FAA and how those relate to U.S. carriers, as well as how FAA partners with other regulators around the world. Then, FAA Associate Administrator for Aviation Safety, Peggy Gilligan, will drill down with us a little bit and discuss some of the great work being done in the Commercial Aviation Safety Team, otherwise known as CAST, and its related activities. With those remarks in mind, we'll get into the meat of this morning's discussion. Our first panel, moderated by Captain Don Wyckoff, President of the International Federation of Airline Pilots Associations, will discuss some of the basic challenges, not just to the U.S., but around the world, in establishing good, solid, safety data-centric programs. They'll illustrate some of the barriers that exist and how they can be overcome. We'll take a break to have some time with our colleagues. Then Mr. Tony Fazio, FAA's Director of Accident Investigation and Prevention, will lead a discussion of one of the key elements of a proactive data program, and that's ensuring the data we gather is used to improve safety and what some of the challenges are to making sure that the data is not used inappropriately. Shortly after noon, we'll break for lunch, and that will be in this room. We'll have the opportunity to enjoy a buffet that will be set up for us, but you'll want to be back in place in time to listen to Mr. John Beatty, the new CEO of Flight Safety Foundation, give us his thoughts from an international perspective. Flight Safety Foundation is in a unique position to see aviation safety programs in just about every environment imaginable worldwide, so their view, as John will share with us, reminds us that we are truly a global industry with both similarities and differences of size and scope of operation, but with one common goal: to continue the safest mode of transportation possible everywhere on the planet. After lunch, we'll dive deeper into our discussion of how data are used. We'll build on the morning conversation of how best to get the data and keep the data flowing, and start the discussion of actually using that data to build good safety mitigation programs. Captain Chuck Hoagman, ALPA's Aviation Safety Chair, will lead us in his panel in illustrating how safety data can be used to develop effective strategies for improving the safety of operations, whether it's by the airlines, manufacturers, or flight crews. We'll take our final break of the day and finish our panel discussions with a little bit of a different slant on things, how we can effectively use safety data in investigations. Captain Nick Siemel, ALPA's head of our SMS efforts, will guide that discussion. Earlier this year, our friends at NTSB hosted an entire day's discussion of what, with all the data we have available nowadays, the differences and responsibilities are between investigating agencies, the regulators, the manufacturers, and the airlines. Captain Siemel's panel will build on that discussion in the context of the rest of today's remarks. Each of our panelists has a different perspective on how data, sometimes the same data, can and should be used as different organizations discharge their responsibilities. Finally, we're extremely fortunate to have Mr. Martin Ely, Director General of Civil Aviation for Transport Canada, join us for our final remarks. As most of you know, Transport Canada has a long, well-respected history as a leader in establishing proactive safety initiatives. Martin will be able to take his organization's experience and apply valuable lessons learned to the various concepts and challenges that we'll be discussing here today. You'll note that we have included the bios of our speakers in your packages there, and as with most of these events, we really want to devote most of the time to really get into the meat and potatoes of the discussion. So please do review the bios of this very, very talented and distinguished group. We hope this will be a very interactive event today that invites and encourages audience participation. To that end, we've set aside time during each of the panel for you to engage the speakers and ask questions. 2 aisle microphones are set up for your use, and since our event is also being webcast, we have included the capability to submit questions via text. Those of you in the room are welcome to use that capability as well, of course. Please also note that there is a yellow evaluation form at each of your seats. We would appreciate it if you would let us know what you think about this program and how we can improve upon this and others, because as you know, we have established a long, actually recent tradition of having a number of one-day focused events, and one kind of builds upon the other. Please drop off completed forms at the registration desk. A moment ago, I mentioned FAA's leadership in the advancement of proactive safety data programs. Our first speakers of the morning are the FAA leadership who are at the forefront of this effort, and we're very fortunate to have them here with us today. Administrator Huerta has been on the job only a couple years, but it was immediately obvious to all of us that he understands the need for his organization to take a global leadership role in ensuring safety through the collection and use of safety data rather than simply enforcing rules through sanctions, otherwise known as the hammer. We'll also hear from the member of his leadership team that has been the driving force behind that effort, sitting right next to Michael, and that's Peggy Gilligan. Many of us remember a time when FAA's only enforcement tool was that hammer I was just talking about. Peggy has led the change away from that philosophy and has truly transformed her organization. Under her leadership, FAA has recognized that the way to improve safety is not to punish, but rather to educate. She has championed the cause of identifying the right kind of data, finding it, aggregating it, and most importantly, sharing it for the betterment of the entire industry. She recognized the value of the tens of thousands of frontline employees who see the safety issues every day, and that making it easy for them to share those observations by creating a climate that encourages open, non-punitive reporting is really the way to great safety dividends. And so it has, as we will hear many times today, I'm sure. We all understand that safety regulations have their place, but we also know there's value in exceeding the minimum requirements. Peggy and her organization within the FAA have not only made compliance a team effort, but they have extended that team spirit to collaboratively finding ways to make the system safer than the rules require. Regulators, airlines, and employee work groups working together to find and fix potential safety problems before they turn into serious hazards. Premortem. We have the FAA's Safety A team with us today, and we're anxious to hear what they have to say. So without further ado, I would like to introduce the Administrator of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, the Honorable Michael Huerta. The floor is yours, Michael.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Sean. It's great to see everyone here, and I'd like to offer a special welcome to our international guests. The distance that you've traveled to get here is certainly a testament to the importance of our shared mission, and that is, of course, to enhance safety. This year marks the 100th anniversary of commercial flight. We've seen a lot of great advancements in that 100-year period, from the jet age to the glass cockpit to nonstop routes that span the globe. And since its first flight, commercial aviation has carried more than 65 billion, that's billion, passengers. We all know that aviation is evolving quickly, and we'll see the next 65 billion passengers in a whole lot less time, in the next 15 to 20 years. Now, because of that rapid growth, one of our top priorities is to make sure that the FAA continues to play a leadership role for safety on the global stage. We want global aviation to be safer, to be more efficient, and to be greener. And we want to set the standards for safety and technology throughout the world. The pilots and all the aviation professionals here in the room help us make all of that possible. Let me be clear, without partnership, there is no leadership. It's no surprise that we're not alone in our desire to spread the safety net. Within the last 6 months, I've traveled a great deal. I've been to Colombia, to Singapore, to Europe, to China and Japan. The common thread for each of the discussions that we've had with our international counterparts is how the international aviation community will achieve smarter regulation for safety and cost-effective measures to achieve a vibrant and safe aviation system. Now, data sharing needs to be part of any system that's striving for safety. Data sharing and international partnership go hand in hand. As you'll hear from Peggy Gilligan and throughout the day, data sharing is pivotal if we're to enhance safety worldwide. And I think there's little doubt that data sharing has the potential to be the single greatest catalyst for aviation safety in the decades to come. It's already taking hold. The Commercial Aviation Safety Team signed an agreement with ICAO's Pan American Regional Aviation Safety Group to share U.S. operator experience at 22 Latin American and Caribbean airports. The Regional Safety Group has identified 30 safety enhancement initiatives for runway safety, controlled flight into terrain, and loss of control in flight. And maybe most importantly, this agreement lets the Pan American Safety Group and the Commercial Aviation Safety Team share detailed data through the Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing System, or ASIAS. This system allows us to discover common, systemic safety problems proactively, spanning multiple aspects of the air transportation system. That's not the only activity, however. In March, the Commercial Aviation Safety Team and the International Air Transportation Association signed an information sharing agreement. It's similar to what we have with the regional aviation safety groups through the Americas and Asia, and it calls for us to exchange top-level safety risks and mitigation strategies. In addition to spreading a global safety net, we're also focusing on risk-based decision-making. The goal here is to make aviation system the system which is so safe to make it even smarter. The U.S. commercial fatality risk already is at an historic low. In fact, it's 83% lower than it was only in 1996. Because of this success, it's imperative that we be smart in our approach to ensuring safety. Risk-based decision-making puts the greatest risk at the top of the list. We pay attention to what's going on to pay the biggest dividend. Now, not every project or every program can be the top priority, nor should it be. The corollary is that without a risk-based approach, it's difficult to know what your top priority is supposed to be. With a risk-based approach to decision-making, we sharpen our safety efforts, we identify and then address the highest risk areas. As we do this, the FAA will evolve to a safety oversight model where we can prioritize our safety inspection efforts. We'll have the decision tools to consider reducing certain oversight activities for known system operators that have strong safety management systems of their own and strong safety cultures. This way, we can achieve compliance in a more efficient and a more collaborative manner. Our focus on international safety and risk-based decision-making lends itself to a discussion, of course, about data. If you walk away with one thing, and one thing only, from what I have to say this morning, let it be this: the data has to come from you. It is important that you keep providing it. And if your organization does not participate in data sharing efforts, I ask you to encourage it to do so. Encourage your dispatchers, your maintenance crews, and your cabin crews to submit safety reports. Many of you have these programs set up already. We just need to promote more reporting. By getting their input along with the pilot reports, we'll have an even more comprehensive view of the system safety risk. This way, we're able to analyze that data and take more steps that enable us to enhance safety. Our safety mitigation efforts are only as good as the data they're fed with. It's that simple. Working together, aviation professionals have created a system that is literally safe beyond words. Through effort and sheer hard work, we've reduced the frequency of commercial accidents dramatically. And you'll hear from panels later today that wasn't something that happened all by itself. Taking the next step won't happen on its own either. CAST and ASIAS are where this next step will happen. These are the keys to the data sharing that will unlock the future of accident prevention. But they only work in partnership if that partnership is the active ingredient. There are 45 airlines currently participating in SIAS. That's a lot, but there's always room for more. And I need to emphasize, as the very first panel will do, that none of this is set up to be punitive. Punishment is not the intent. What we want and what the system needs is for each of the professionals in it to step forward with voluntary information about safety issues. We've seen a lot of examples already throughout the system. John Duncan will provide you chapter and verse where things that we thought were one of a kind were happening more frequently than hoped. Let's face it, when you're in a system that's as safe as ours, you have a system that's run by professionals who are experts at spotting problems and then fixing them. When it comes to doing things right, commercial pilots are the perfect example. I'm focusing on that intervening step between spotting a problem and then fixing it. That's the place where information needs to come forward. That's a key if we're going to isolate, understand, and remediate problems. It's a key if we're going to drive the commercial accident rate, which is already remarkable, if we're going to drive it down even further. It's key if we're going to extend the net of aviation safety to the four corners of the globe. Allow me to underscore a point about safety. We're not in a position to legislate or prevent every conceivable issue or risk or problem. The ultimate end state for all of this lies within voluntary compliance, where the professional follows or adopts the best practice simply because it is the best practice. We can't get to the next level of safety if people do what's right only if there's a rule in place that says that they must, or if they don't follow the best practice because there isn't a requirement to do so. After the wrong runway departure accident in Lexington, Kentucky in 2006, we learned several lessons. The most important one was that data, when we look at it collectively, when we look at it across the industry, it's available for us to connect the dots. And data showed us that we had gaps in our safety nets. So the real question becomes, how do you prevent this from ever happening again? The rulemaking process, by its design, is slow and deliberate, and it takes many years. But what happened after Lexington happened quickly. Airlines began to put technologies like moving map displays and runway awareness advisory systems in the cockpit, not because they had to, but because they knew it would result in better safety. Voluntary compliance saves time, but more importantly, it enables us to save lives. This conference is dedicated to the fact that partnership is critical to safety. Data sharing very clearly is the future of aviation safety. We depend on inputs from professionals who have stepped forward, groups like ALPA and the airlines themselves. It all depends on you, and I want to thank all of you for your willingness to step forward. Aviation, as we know, is evolving rapidly. I imagine that 100 years from now, the professionals who follow us will enjoy the benefits of the foundation that we have put in place with data sharing. The system they will use will be shaped by decisions and choices that we will make today. And I look forward to working with you and in this industry, all of us together, to give them the most solid foundation we can possibly build. So thank you very much. I appreciate your willingness to participate in this conference today. Thank you.
Please.
Be happy to take any questions. If anyone has any? No. It's hot. It's Monday morning. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Boy, what a shy group out there. You know, it's an observation I make over and over again that the likelihood that somebody is going to ask a question is inversely proportional to the size of the group. Because I guarantee you, once we take a break, there's going to be a whole scrum of you folks that go and try to grab that gentleman over there, and you missed your opportunity right here. So, Well, thank you very much for those remarks, Michael. And now we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive, and I'm going to invite Peggy Gilligan, the Associate Administrator for Safety at the FAA, to really help us get into some of the things that she's done a remarkable job, and that's taking a safety approach that looks at things forensically after the accident to developing a safety system, especially through the Commercial Air Safety Team, that takes a proactive look at things by preventing the accident before it happens. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for all of those kind remarks. I know, as Sean pointed out, the agenda says I'm going to lay the foundation for the conference themes of moving towards a just culture and using data proactively. But I know also that many of you know the history of that as well as I do, because we've written it together, and that is really the foundation that we need to be building on. You know, if you look back in the 1990s, and even before, headlines about aviation were very painful for us. As we think back, when you think of them, they still are. ValueJet crashes in the Everglades, 110 lives lost. TWA explodes over Long Island, all aboard are lost. These tragedies were almost 2 decades ago, but I'm sure most of us here remember where we were when we heard about them. ValueJet, the Saturday before Mother's Day, 1995. TWA 800, a warm summer night, Wednesday, 8 p.m. It's fair to say that these two events are what brings us together here today. 2 decades ago, we began to realize as an industry that the time had come for us to fight the battle for safety together. We needed to get to the bottom of these events, but more importantly, we needed to understand how we could move to an even higher level of safety. You know, the truth is that way back in the 50s and 60s in aviation, it was far less safe. There were regular crashes, at times even one a week, major crashes. Through those early years, with detailed accident investigation that let us understand the causes of the crashes, we chipped away at our risks. We put in place more and better training. We found technology solutions. For example, after the midair in Cerritos, we were all convinced that collision avoidance systems were the right way to go. But the accidents of the 90s were much more complex sets of problems. In each case, work of the NTSB to determine the probable and contributing causes was nothing short of spectacular. It took real detective work to figure those out, because each of those accidents demonstrated quite starkly that it was the result of a series of events that aligned in a particular way that led to the catastrophic outcome. And while that investigative work was underway, the question was asked, what can be done to make aviation safer? So the White House Commission on Aviation Safety and Security was formed, chaired by Vice President Gore. Its work led to a challenge: to reduce the commercial fatal accident rate by 80% in 10 years, something all of us involved in aviation safety at the time thought was impossible. Then Congress established the National Civil Aviation Review Commission, chaired by former Congressman Norman Mineta, who would later serve as Secretary of Transportation. The NCARC, as it came to be known, echoed the recommendation of the Gore Commission, but it added perhaps the most important feature. It found that improving aviation safety called for collaboration between the aviation industry and government. It recommended building a consensus-based safety agenda because it recognized that everything can't be our #1 priority. Mr. Mineta was right then, and we know he's still right today. From those recommendations came the Commercial Aviation Safety Team, an industry-government collaboration that does set a shared safety agenda. Over the years, we've identified safety enhancements that address identified risks in our system. One of the first enhancements to come from CAST addressed a particularly deadly problem: controlled flight into terrain. CFIT had been a leading cause of fatal accidents for decades. Our work underscored the need for Terrain Awareness Warning Systems, or TAWS, a system that would show pilots a computerized depiction of terrain and obstacles on their flight path, and one that would provide an oral warning if mountains, hills, or bodies of water got too close to the airplane. But the team didn't stop there. We actually agreed to 14 enhancements to address CFIT accidents, including improved crew resource management training, enhanced standard operating procedures, development of precision navigation procedures, and enhancements to FAA's minimum safe altitude warning system, because there was a role for each of us to play in reducing the risk of controlled flight into terrain accidents. But what really matters is that as a community, we implemented those 14 changes voluntarily, without rulemaking or legislative direction. When the airlines saw the benefits of TAWS, they began installing the systems right away. And that's really the foundation that we're building on here. When presented with data that shows risk and actions that can mitigate, or as in CFIT's case, that can eliminate risk, safety professionals take action. Let me highlight a few of the other accomplishments. Through CAST, we've developed training guidelines for CRM and standard operating procedures to assure stabilized approaches and to establish go-around procedures. We've developed turbulence awareness training. We've changed icing certification criteria for aircraft design. We've developed controller and pilot training to reduce runway incursions. And we've identified design solutions to reduce runway excursions. Some of the most recent enhancements we've accepted will include standard operating procedures and flight crew training on airplane attitude and energy state awareness to mitigate loss of control accidents. Based on that work, we're up to 99 safety enhancements, but some of our most recent enhancements have been identified before we scratched any paint and before we harmed any passengers. And that's where this work must continue to go. So how do we do it? How do we pull it off? Well, it's because we're all in it together. The membership of CAST reads like a who's who of aviation. ALPA, of course, AIA, Airbus, Allied Pilots, A4A, Boeing, Flight Safety Foundation, GE, IFALPA, NACA, Pratt & Whitney, RAA, and Rolls-Royce. The government representatives, in addition to the FAA, include the Department of Defense and NASA, as well as the Aviation Safety Agency representing Europe. We have observer organizations as well, including IATA, the Association of Asia-Pacific Airlines, Transport Canada, NTSB, ICAO, and NATCA. With that kind of participation, and more importantly, with that kind of commitment, reaching our goals has been assured. You can't fully understand where CAST is going, though, until you also understand the underground stream that feeds it, the Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing Program, or ASIAS. As Michael indicated, ASIAS brings together large amounts of safety data from across the industry, and it incorporates some pretty powerful analytic tools. It gives us the ability to be forward-looking and forward-thinking. Through ASIAS, we can detect emerging threats and precursors. And once we implement safety enhancements, and this may be its most important contribution, it gives us the ability to measure the effectiveness of the mitigations we've put in place. So we can determine if we're having the impact that we intended, and if not, we can go back and find new improvements. Now, we started ASIAS about 6 years ago with 3 airlines. As Michael mentioned, we now have 45 air carriers. We have 6 corporate operators who are also contributing data, and that represents the vast majority of operations in the national airspace system. In all, through ASIAS, we access 185 data sources. Most of those are publicly available, but the airlines voluntarily provide their flight operations quality assurance data, as well as reports from flight crew, maintenance, dispatch, and other employees through their aviation safety action programs. So, how does it work? Let me share a couple of examples. I think most of you are familiar with an industry gathering called InfoShare. It's a place where the airlines share what they're finding in their own data with one another. Well, at one of those gatherings, one airline shared that it had uncovered an issue with the installation of a washer on a particular aircraft. The washer is required by the manufacturer on some makes and models, but not on all makes and models. The washer is located between the outer wheel bearing and the axle nut and is required for tightening the wheel. Well, sometimes the washer stuck to the grease on the wheel during disassembly, and it was easy to overlook in reassembly because, remember, it wasn't required on every make and model. So you see how we sort of set it up. Well, this glitch, as we'll call it, was reported in an airline ASAP program. And the airline saw in its data that it was not a one-time occurrence. The airline shared its experience at InfoShare, along with the actions it took to correct the failure. After the meeting, other airlines went back and looked at their own data. Turns out that this failure wasn't as infrequent as everyone would have thought. But because of ASAP and through InfoShare, it could be identified and corrected. And it was corrected without risk to the maintenance folks who reported it or to the airline that shared the information. Another example. A SIAS can take on what we call a directed study, looking across all the data to see if some seemingly unique occurrence is happening, more than we know, or if there are precursors we can see and address. And that's what we did when we looked into loss of control accidents. As many of you know, loss of control continues to be a major cause of fatal accidents internationally, but we haven't had recent experience in the U.S. So we examined the data from international accidents and incidents, including a couple of U.S. incidents, to see what we could learn. The analysis showed we could see the precursor events to those accidents in the U.S. data. We had some of the same things happening in our system, but due to crew response or aircraft design or perhaps both, we'd been able to intervene to prevent a catastrophic failure. But now that we know we face those same risks, we can, and we have, designed safety interventions to make our system even safer. That's the power of data analysis. So how can we build on this foundation for continued success? Well, that's what you're going to be talking about today. As Sean identified, how do we continue to get the data? How do we encourage reporting and protect those who share their experience? Once we've got the data, how do we know we're using it to address the right things? What should be our strategies? And when we have a failure, an accident, how do we use the data to get to the bottom of what happened while protecting the individuals involved? These are the important issues facing our continued effort to make the safest form of transportation even safer. This group is the right group to help us find those answers. So I wish you a very successful day. Thank you. And if you have any questions now for the administrator, he's still here. He'll be glad to do them. Or for me, I'd be glad to take any questions. If not, thanks again. Good luck today, and I'll be interested in what comes out of all this. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Well, now that Michael and Peggy have set the table, we're going to get underway with our discussion. So I'm going to ask the first panel to start making their way up so they can get mic'd up. We do have a few minutes, so you're welcome to recharge your coffee while we do so. But let me just put one thing out. There's a gentleman here that's joining us today. It's Dr. Lynne Freeman, who's right back there, and he's director at the George Washington School of Medicine. He basically oversees the program that teaches and accredits hospital administrators. And Lynn contacted me and asked if I was interested in coming and sharing our perspectives of how data management, data program, data aggregation programs work with an eye towards reducing error factors and ultimately preventable fatalities in the medical system. And when you look at some of the stats that they're dealing with, there's clearly a lot of tremendous benefits that can be derived from learning some of the lessons that we've learned the hard way into making such a great proactive safety data system. If that's not a testament to the effectiveness and the leadership that these folks right here have shown, as well as all the folks in the room, I don't know what is. And so it's just to kind of put a little bit of perspective on how effective and how well regarded these type of programs are. So we're going to have everybody get mic'd up. Please, right back in